As we begin lesson C4, standard form of equations, this is lesson 5.5 in your book. The I can statements is I can write an equation in standard form. I can rewrite an equation so it's in standard form. I can identify the linear function. This is your standard form, the ax plus by equals c. I can relate the a, b, and c to the x-intercept, the y-intercept, and the slope. And I can use the definition of both x-intercept and y-intercept to find intercepts in a standard equation. So when we talk about standard form of an equation, standard form is when it's written as ax plus by equals c. So up to this point we've had slope-intercept and point-slope. It says there are many equivalent forms of equations for any one line. You know that they can be different in point-slope equations because this is where some of our general guidelines for standard form. The a term is not negative. We avoid using fractions and decimals when we talk about standard form. Unless you're dealing with a money situation, then you might have a decimal. Typically the a, b, and c do not have any common factors, which means they're in simplest form. And in our book, generally we're going to follow the guidelines as we look at those answers in the back. So, how do we find the x and y intercepts if we are looking at an equation like 3x plus 4y equals 24? Keep in mind, the x-intercept is when you put in 0 for y, and you find what x equals. So in this equation, we're going to rewrite 3x plus 4 times 0 equals 24. If 3x equals 24, hopefully you're all recognizing we would divide both sides by 3, and x is 8. So the x-intercept is 8, means we are located at the point 8, 0. It's on the x-axis. Whereas when we find the y-intercept as we look at that, is when we replace the x with 0 and we solve for y. When you replace the x with 0, for y equals 24, you would divide both sides by 4 to get y equals 6. So the y-intercept is 6, which is located at the point 0, 6. What do we notice about the x-intercept when we compare our values of a, b, and c? What you should notice is that your x-intercept, the x-intercept is going to be equal to the value of c, which in our case was 24, divided by our a. And 24 divided by 3 is equal to 8. Again, what do we notice about our y-intercept when we're comparing the values of our a, our b, and our c? Well, we got 6, and if we are looking at the y-intercept, the y-intercept is going to be equal to taking the value of c, and in this case dividing it by b. And in this case, if we think of that, 24 divided by our b, which was 4, which equals 6. So that's kind of how those are related. Graphing using intercepts. Well, the nice thing is when you know your x and y intercept, you can simply plot those 2 points. So when an equation's in standard form, instead of getting it in slope-intercept, we want to find the x-intercept. The x-intercept, if we are looking at that, is when y equals 0. The y-intercept is when x is equal to 0 and you solve the equation. So if we are solving this equation up here, we're now going to replace the y with 0, which means we're going to have x minus 2 times 0 equals negative 2. So in this case, x equals negative 2, which means when y is 0, we're going to go to negative 2, 0. This is my x-intercept. What is our y-intercept? Again, if we're thinking about the y-intercept is when x is 0, so 0 minus 2y equals negative 2. We're going to divide both sides by negative 2, and y is going to be equal to a positive 1. So we're looking at the point 0, 1. 0, 1. We were also looking at this point being negative 2, 0. Once we have those 2 points, we can draw our line. We notice that the slope is 1/2, up 1 over 2. We could get more points on our line and connect those with arrows. So we plot the points and then we draw the line. And the question now that we want to take a look at is, what is the slope of our line? And anytime we're thinking about our slope, remember, slope is always equal to our rise over the run. How does this relate to our variables? In this case, it was up, rise of 1, run of 2. When we think of our variables and we're looking at our numbers, again, make sure you take a look, thinking about A in this case was equal to 1, B was equal to -2, and C was equal to -2. And in this case, if we are looking at our slope, the slope is going to be equal to the opposite, or negative, A divided by B. So if we think about that, our A was 1. We're going to have a -1 divided by B, which was a -2, comes out to be 1/2. If you need to pause the video or go back to make sure you understand this, please make sure you do so. How do we transform an equation to standard form? What that means is we want to rewrite an equation so it's in standard form. Remember, typically we can write the A term has to be non-negative and only integers for A, B, and C, which means no fractions, no decimals. So the first thing is we look at this equation, we need to get rid of our denominator of 7. How to get rid of a denominator of 7? We're going to multiply every single term by 7. So if we multiply every single term by 7, our first one will become 7y equals 7 divided by 7 is 1. So we'll now have a -3x plus 35. Again, we usually want the A term to be non-negative. Here it's negative. So we're going to add 3x to both sides. And our final answer would be 3x plus 7y is equal to 35. How do you do it when you have an equation like this, where you kind of have that distributive property? Well, you might want to distribute this out first, so that we have y minus 2 equals a -1/3 x, plus, if I take a -1/3 times 6, that's actually going to give me a -2. The next thing I might want to do as I'm looking at this equation is think, oh, I want to get my x term over on the other side. It needs to be positive. So I might add 1/3 x. Are there other ways of doing this? There definitely are. So if I add the 1/3 x to both sides, I now have the equation 1/3 x plus y minus 2 equals a -2. Again, at this point when we are taking a look at this, what we want to see is we want to notice that we are trying to get the x and y by itself. So by adding 2 to both sides, we get 0 equals. We now have 1/3 x plus y equals 0. But again, we said we can't have a fraction. So we're going to multiply each term times 3. When you multiply each one by 3, it's nice. 0 times 3 is still going to give us 0. And we now have 3 over 3, which is just x, plus 3y equals 0. The question that I want you to think about is this. If 3x plus 9y equals 0, is this also the correct answer for this question? Is this the correct answer for, instead of having x plus 3y equals 0? And the key thing we want to think about for this number 2 right here is that the same answer is, it is the same answer, but the thing you need to be really careful for is we want the least common factor. The least common factor must be 1. And in this case, they both have a 3 in common. So this is not in simplest form. So you always want the least common factor to be 1 if we are looking at that. So if we would divide the A, the B, and the C by 3, we would get x plus 3y equals 0, which is the form we want to have. We always want to make sure that there are no common factors when you have it in standard form. Okay, so that is a key thing that we want you to be thinking about. Now, the last couple things that we are going to look at in this unit is how can we rewrite in standard form. when we look at a graph. If we look at the graph x equals 3, what we're really thinking is that we have 1x plus 0y equals 3. That's telling us that our x-intercept was, remember, c divided by a. What is our c value? It is 1 divided by, in this case, our 3 value, is 3. Our a value is 1, so our x-intercept is 3. That means we are looking at the point for our x-intercept being at 3, and y is 0. What's our y-intercept in this problem? Our y-intercept, again, is going to be c divided by b. Our c value is 3, divided by b is 0. Undefined. There isn't one. Okay, so when we are looking at this, there is no y-intercept in this equation. And if you think about that equation, and we are graphing it, for some reason my pen isn't working, we are talking about this point, and remember, when x equals a number, we are talking about a vertical line, and the slope is undefined when we look at that. How do we graph y equals -2? Again, think about it this way. 0x plus, as we stated here, it's 0x plus 1y equals -2. Thinking of our a being 0, b being 1, and c being -2. What is our x-intercept going to be? We want to take c and divide by a. Our c was -2 divided by a, which in this case is 0, and we have an undefined y-intercept, which means x-intercept, which means there is no x-intercept. The y-intercept is when we take c in this case and divide by b. c divided by b is going to be -2 over 1, which means our y-intercept is down at -2. And if we think of this line is going to be a horizontal line where everywhere on this line y is -2, and it wouldn't matter where you place the point, all of these points will make it true, and it is a horizontal line. So the key thing we want to look at here is in this line, all the x's equal 3, and on this line, all the y's are equal to -2. Got a horizontal line and a vertical line. Now, how can we generalize this? If we think of any equation where x equals any number is going to be a vertical line, and any equation where y equals any number is going to be horizontal. So we have our horizontal, we have our vertical line. How can you remember this? If you remember in our notes, one of the first days, we had the HOY VUX. HOY is horizontal, 0 slope, y equals VUX, VUX for vertical line, undefined, with an equation x equals. So it says write an equation for a vertical line if we're going to practice it. If it's vertical, key thing, we want to think x equals, and it can be any number, x equals 3, x equals -2, x equals -1.732. If it's a horizontal line, y is equal to -3, y equals -4/5. If we're going to write an equation that's neither horizontal or vertical, the key thing is that you have to have an x and a y and some other number. And it could just be x and y equals 0. It could be 2x minus 3y equals 7. All of those will be non-vertical or non-horizontal lines. One of the last few things that we're going to look at before we summarize and finish this unit is how do we look at this. So I want you to try this problem, and I'm going to pause the video, read it through, and then we'll look at the equations. Our video is almost done. If we look at the equation, 1, if we are looking at it song, plus $15 for each movie, and we spent a total of 60. Standard form of an equation. I found the y-intercept first, then I found the x-intercept. What does that mean in terms of I can buy 4 movies and no songs, or 60 songs and no movies? And we are looking at our line being this equation. The last page of your notes is just making sure you understand this. So hold it at this, look it over, read it through, make sure all these things are making sense to you.